Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kyra, and here on this channel we are all about real makeup for real life and real people. Today's video is a very exciting palette related video. As you would have seen by the title, this is all about my top 3 palettes in 10 different categories. You might ask who came up with these categories, and I'm going to tell you it was Alejandra Lisette, or Alex, here on YouTube. She is a fantastic project panner, but she also has a lot of other content, and she loves to rank palettes, which I also love to do. So I'm going to have her as well as her original video linked down in the description box, but I don't know that she originally intended it to be more like a tag, but she did offer for anyone that wanted to do the same video to do that, and I just had to because I really enjoyed the categories that she came up with. This may be a little bit of a longer video, you know me, I like to talk, but with all of that said, let's get into it. I will say I did not repeat any single palette within all of these answers, but there are, you know, multiple Natasha Denona palettes, multiple Juvia's Place palettes, ABH, I don't know. But the point is, I did not repeat any palettes. However, some palettes are still available, some not so much. But let's go ahead and start with the first category, which is indie brands. Now, each of these palettes, for myself anyways, are not in any particular order. It's just my top 3, my favorite 3 in each of these categories. So starting with one of my favorite independent brands, it is Juvia's Place, and this is the Nubian 3 Coral palette. I absolutely adore this palette. I especially love this for fall heading into winter. I'm such a big fan of mixing warm tones and cool tones. I think the contrast can really add a lot of interest to your eye look, and therefore I love the cool tone grays and silvers in here combined with the beautiful warm terracotta coral peachy tones. This is definitely going to be making an appearance this fall, so stay tuned for that. Next is, unfortunately, a palette that has already been discontinued. They have put out a new version of it, but it has less shades, and I'm not for sure exactly what happened there. But it is my Aether Beauty Rose Quartz Crystal Gemstone palette. Looks like this. I love this palette already. I love that it has warm and cool tones, and I also love these really special sort of duochrome shades in the center here when layered over other shadows. They don't look like much in the pan, but I assure you they are beautiful. And if I swatch everything, we'll never leave this video. So I do love this palette. I think Aether Beauty is a brand I would like to try more from. So if you have any recommendations down below, let me know. I was very intrigued by their new purple palette that came out. So if you've tried it, let us know. But possibly my all-time favorite indie brand palette from my entire collection has got to be my Sydney Grace Enduring Love palette. First of all, I love that they have 2 versions. They have a lighter version and a darker version. I myself have the lighter one, and I will link any related like multi-look videos down in the description box for you. I think I did 6 or 7 looks with this one, and there was no disappointment there. I cannot wait to bust out this beautiful sort of muted color story for the fall and especially for the winter. These are just smooth as butter. I cannot stand how beautiful and foiled they are. The mattes are incredibly smooth, silky, and soft, but thin. So you're gonna get that color payoff without adding a lot of powder to your eyes, if that is something that concerns you. So I definitely highly recommend this palette. Probably one of my #1 recommendations for this entire video. Next, for Drugstore, I've noticed for some reason my Drugstore palette drawer is dwindling. Partially, I did declutter some ColourPop stuff, but anyways. For Drugstore, I do have two same brand palettes, same type palettes, and they are my two favorite e.l.f. bite-size eyeshadow palettes. The first one you guys have seen possibly many times if you've been around for any amount of time. This is the Pumpkin Pie Quad, and I love this. I have pan on this bronze shade here, but I love any combination of these shades, and I think it is so nice that you have, you know, a nice bronzy brown look and a nice coppery orange look, but you could also flip-flop things if you wanted to as well. I think the shimmers in here are beautiful one-and-done shadows, and I frequently wear them that way. So definitely recommend that one. But a newer favorite, and it is not rose water, is the e.l.f. Bite Size Mint Melt Quad in the shade Chocolate Mint. I do also have the other one, but I just think this one is leaps and bounds above the other one in terms of quality. The mattes in here are very soft and blendable, as are the shimmers, and I just adore this particular mint green shade. My hands are so dry. It's just, there's something different and special about it. There's almost like a duochrome factor to it, but I can't quite put my finger on it. And then of course you have a beautiful champagne that works great for every day, inner corner, etc, etc. I love these two mattes. They're great for transition and a crease or however you want to use them, but I really do enjoy this one. And then lastly, for the drugstore category, you would have seen this very recently, and that is the Maybelline Nudes of New York palette. This is such a great palette, let alone a drugstore palette. The drugstore can be a little bit disappointing from time to time when it comes to eyeshadow formulas, and I really was looking at drugstore eyeshadows, not affordable, you know, not BH Cosmetics or things that you could find on the drugstore side at Ulta. I went specifically with drugstore eyeshadows, and I love these. These are really beautiful. You've got warm tones, you've got cool tones, gradient from light to dark, everything that you need from blending shades to highlighting shades, lid shades, deepening shades, crease shades, transition shades. It's all in here, and I just love this one. I did recently do 2 looks with this because it was in my monochromatic project pan for the month of August. So I'll link that. And then on the polar opposite end of the spectrum are my top 3 luxury palettes. Now I do have luxury palettes in other categories and things like that, but these are my top 3 luxury palettes currently in my collection. The first one is one that I knew I would put in this video, but I didn't quite know where I was going to put it, and that is my Natasha Denona Bronze palette. This is a beautiful palette, and I think it spans many seasons. I think you can wear this anytime. I especially love it for summer and fall. I love the amount of lid shades as well as deepening shades, as well as this beautiful pop of indigo. You've got a darker cream to powder shadow as well as a shimmer here, and whatever it is about adding these 2 cool tone shadows to any of the warmth in this palette just creates such an interesting look that you're not going to expect. I did do a video a while back featuring this, and I did do like a cool outer corner with a warm rest of the eye. It was a glowy summer nights video, so I'll link that one for you in case you're curious. But this is beautiful. Quite possibly the most beautiful shade in here is the shade Silk. It is so beautiful, just slick and molten metally and glittery and just stunning. And then the other 2 palettes for luxury brands are, funnily enough, both holiday palettes from last year. The first one is the Pat McGrath Mothership Mega Celestial Divinity palette. I did review this palette last year as well as created multiple looks with it. I'm very keen to try a normal Pat McGrath palette because I get the feeling that the textures in here aren't all consistent with what you would find in her regular black lacquered packaging mothership palettes. But I do love this palette. I do wish I had a few more mattes in here. I think your only mattes are like this orchid purple, this pink, and then this burgundy up here. And not always my jam with every look that I might create out of here, but the shimmers are stunning and the textures are stunning, and I have just loved working with this palette so much. And then lastly, for the luxury category, is the Charlotte Tilbury Bejeweled Eyes to Hypnotize, and it looks like this. I love all of the trios in here. I particularly love this bronzy trio here and the more purple trio here. Definitely cannot wait to pull this out and use it more. I love the looks that I created out of here when I reviewed it, and to me, this is the epitome of luxury. It's sleek, it's skinny, it has beautiful packaging as she always does, and I don't know, there's just something about these that feel more luxury than Pat or Natasha, which is odd, but just the way I feel. I can't help it. The next category is called mainstream, and how Alex described this is as brands that the everyday makeup consumer, not a YouTube watcher, not a creator, none of that shenanigans, people off the street would recognize these brands and possibly own a palette from these brands. Now, not necessarily these specific palettes, but these are my top three from three mainstream brands. Starting with my Urban Decay Naked Ultraviolet palette. I still love this palette. One of the things I love most about this palette are the different tones of purple that you get in here, some leaning more blue, some leaning more pink. But I also love that you have a very neutral half, and that neutral half is both cool and warm, and any combination in between. Like I mentioned before with the Coral palette, I love cool tones and warm tones mixed together. It's just so interesting and eye-catching. So this is definitely a top for me. Next, probably one of the most recognizable brands beyond Urban Decay, I think anyways, is Anastasia Beverly Hills, as we lovingly call it, ABH. And this is the Soft Glam palette. I really love this, especially for a neutral palette. I think this is a great everyday palette, a great bridal palette. I think you could definitely pull some glam looks out of here as well. I just think this is an all-around really well-balanced palette. You've got your light to dark, mattes and shimmers, some satin, and just lovely, 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 lovely. So I really love this palette. It's kind of my go-to neutral palette, or one of them, I should say. I did recently hit pan on Rose Pink here, and I just think this is a great palette. And for me, this one always beat out Modern Renaissance, although I think a lot of people probably know and recognize that palette as well. Lastly, my very first high-end palette. It's an oldie, a real oldie, but still a goodie in my eyes. I worked on hitting pan and a shade in this palette as well this year, and that is my Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. My beloved, I love her so much. I did hit pan in this shade right here called Luscious, and I just think this is an all-around great palette as well. You've got neutral, but you've got a few pops of color to add interest. You've got some different textures in here. You know, a gradient again from light to dark, which I always appreciate. It does still smell like peaches, I can report. This is just such a good palette. I think it's one that anybody could use, and I think it's well loved and well known for a reason. Next is Cruelty-Free, and I have a lot of Cruelty-Free palettes in my collection, but I only really came up with two favorites, so I'm not going to fake it. I'm going to let you guys know which ones they are. The first one is again in the ABH palette, and that is my Norvina palette. I just Love the variety that this has to offer. The shimmers in here are stunning. The mattes are well performing and stunning. I think they're really consistent across the board with the mattes in this one, where some others can be hit or miss. And just all together a stunning, stunning palette. It pairs well with other palettes, and I am never disappointed with the looks that I come out with this one. And then secondly and lastly in this category is my ColourPop That's Taupe palette. I probably could have put Going Coconuts in here, but to be frank, since I got That's Taupe, I have not really messed around with my Going Coconuts palette all that much. I just prefer this, partially because it has a Super Shock shadow in here, and if you're not familiar with those, they're very sparkly and beautiful, but they're almost soft and cushy like a putty. So it is an extremely easy way to wear glitter and add some glitz and glam to your look. But you could also 100% come up with everyday looks with this one. And while it looks cool tone, it does have some variation. I would say that these two up here are a little more neutral to warm. You have this shade down here, which is actually more green than anything, which I absolutely adore. So this is definitely and by far one of my favorite Cruelty-Free palettes. This next category I thought was really fun because regardless of their size, I do think these type of palettes tend to get lost within our collections, and those are large palettes. Let's talk first about a palette that's not based on the size of the palette itself, but based on the number of shades inside, and that is my precious Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. You get a ton of shades in here. 24, is that right? 32? I can't math. 32, I think. And I love that she did this. I wish she would do this more often, where she put the shades closer together and we get more shades versus more packaging, because to me this is a great value for money, as well as a nice layout in terms of, you know, just not a lot of wasted space, I guess. So this one I chose purely because of how many shades you get inside, but it is a favorite because of the colors and because of the non-wasted space. One that's been discontinued, which is a true bummer, but still a favorite of mine, is my Sephora Pro Editorial 2.0 palette. One of the most unique color stories in my collection. I think this spans the seasons as well, which makes it a really good palette to have around. I can use spring, summer, winter, fall. It's all in here. Great mixture of both mattes and shimmers, satins, more toppery type shades, duochromes, pastels, saturated jewel tones. It has it all in here, and the formula is really beautiful. So I definitely love this one, but admittedly don't pull it out and use it nearly enough, mostly because it's discontinued and I need to like let go of that. And then lastly in this category is my ABH Norvina palette volume 1, and this is still my favorite. I mean, verdict's out on volume 4, which I haven't had for very long, but this one I absolutely love. Every shade in here is a winner, which is more than I can say for volumes 2 and 3. I was most impressed with the shimmers in this palette. This white is the most pigmented white shadow I have ever used. And while one might wonder why you would want a matte white, I assure you I do use it. I love a matte white inner corner, brow bone highlight, depending on the look. But this is really beautiful. You've got fluorescent, you've got jewel tones, you've got neutrals, everything you would need to make a beautiful look, and I love this one still. All right, next we have influencer collabs. Top 3. 2 of these I have, and one of them is depotted, so we'll get to that. Let's start with the one I don't have together anymore, and that is my ColourPop and Kathleen Lights Dream Street palette. I recently depotted several of my discontinued ColourPop palettes and absorbed those into my singles collection, so I'll just have a picture up here for you. But I really adore this palette. I've talked about it countless times. A lot of people do. It's a great palette. You've got a beautiful pop of coral. You've got a couple of teals in there, some great neutrals, some of my favorite neutrals in my collection, including a beautiful deep brown that has just a touch of plum in it. Love that. Next is my ABH. Told you, repeat brands. My ABH and CARLI BYBEL palette. I really love this. This is very much my personal everyday aesthetic. I love the choices in terms of which were mattes and which were shimmers. My only gripe is that I feel like Jode and OA are too similar to each other. One's just more chunky glitter, but I can let that go because I love everything else in this palette. I love the shade Mandala. I love the shade Moo. I've mentioned before that this gold called Moo is my favorite gold lid shade in my collection. So there's a lot to love in this palette, but just as equally lovable is my ABH and Jackie Aina palette. I cannot wait to bust this puppy out for fall. I have seriously considered doing a 1 month, 1 palette with this, so let me know if that's something you're interested in for the fall. But otherwise, I just love this. I particularly love like this half of the palette. The pinks and the red and this, you know, pretty straightforward purple in here are not my favorites. I do love these two, however, so maybe like this is the palette that I really enjoy. But anyways, I just love this. I think the tones in here are beautiful. Love this duochrome called Sponsored. It's like a blue brown, except for it's like a blue green and or brown green rather. And I love this. Love, love, love this palette. Cannot wait to wear it this fall. Best neutral color stories. Let's get the first one out of the way because we all know I love this palette. Persona Identity palette. No surprise here. I have pan, I have dips in all of the shades. These lid shades, these shimmers are so smoothing on the eyes. If you have mature eyelids or just struggle with really dry eyelids, these are going to do you every favor you ever hoped for in an eyeshadow. It's just a very smooth, buttery formula. The mattes are beautiful, but they're not chalky or powdery or dry. Just beautiful, easy, blendable pigment. Cannot sing its praises enough. The other two are also probably my two other favorite neutral palettes in my collection, starting with the Natasha Denona GLAM palette. I just love the neutral tones in here. So many people call this a cool tone palette, and while it does have some cool tones in here, I do think it has some warmth as well. And I think that's what's great about it, is that the neutrals and the cools and the warms all work together. I'm a big old sucker for nice brightening lid shades, and there are a ton of them in here. You could do so many looks with this. They wouldn't look the same. They'd all look neutral, but they wouldn't look the same. And I love this. From pink to gold to silver, champagne, all the goodness, it lies in here. But if I was looking for a warm tone sister for her, Biba. All the way, baby. Love this. I'm a big fan of the cream to powder shadows, and there are a couple of those in here. You have your absolute perfect shimmer shades. All you need in your life are a good bronze, a good gold, and a good champagne, and here they are right there. Absolutely gorgeous. I love that the black is a cream to powder shadow, so it works beautifully as a liner. But overall, this is just probably one of my most long-awaited but well thought out and turned out the greatest purchases. This is so perfect for me. I just love it. Love it, love it, love it. And she's gorgeous. I recommend. I wish they had a smaller version so people didn't have to spend so much money on a neutral palette, but I'm not Natasha Denona, in case you were curious. Top 3 colorful palettes, colorful color stories, I believe is how she put it. So let's go ahead and get the discontinued one out of the way. And I'm so bummed that this is already discontinued. I don't think it got a fair shake because of COVID and all that jazz, but it is the ColourPop and Raw Beauty Kristi at Foresight palette. I almost put this in with my top 3 influencer collabs, but this is such a beautiful, colorful color story. There are only 2 shimmers in here, and so for me, I really do look at this as like a very saturated, colorful, all matte palette mostly. And eventually, I don't know if I'll depot this one or not, because I'm a huge mushroom fan. Like, I love like the mushroom thing, and this packaging is so cutely printed with mushrooms. But I love these shades. I'm really into jewel tones, especially for fall, so you can probably expect to see this one again really soon. In case you missed it, this month for my Shop My Stash, I decided to do a little experiment called 1 Month 1 Palette, inspired by Sarah Rose here on YouTube. And the palette that I chose was the BH Cosmetics Avocado Toast palette. And I gotta be frank, I love this thing. I love this thing. I am having so much fun with this palette. It's colorful, but it's also neutral. It's green, but there's also other shades besides just a monochromatic green palette. And of course, lots of nice lighter shades, darker shades, mid-tone shades. So I'm a huge fan of this palette. I could not love this palette more, and I can't wait to see how I'm feeling about it again at the end of the month. And then, is this the last one? The last Natasha Denona palette for today is the Natasha Denona Trio Chrome palette. This is a beautiful, colorful palette, and while I was very excited at the prospect of the trio chromes or multi-chromes down the center row here, or column, yes, I was most excited about the mattes in this palette. Natasha Denona, she's not known, or at least at the time this was released, she wasn't known for being that colorful, and this one just really shook me up and made me so happy to purchase it, and I can't wait to use it some more. I'd love to roll it in and try and hit pan on a shade or something with it, because I really want to get more use out of it. And then the last category are pastel palettes, and again, I only have 2 for this. I really don't have a lot of what I would call pastel palettes. Both of these might be a tiny stretch because not all the shades are pastels, but the first one is my ColourPop Blush Crush palette. I do love this palette. All of this palette. Again, you have a Super Shock shade up here. I love these 2 like dusty orchidy purples down here. Just a beautiful palette and quite soft and feminine. Another fun, however, pastel palette for me, again, not entirely pastel, but predominantly, is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. Love the packaging and love the inside even more. You know, your deepest tone is this dark purple here. Otherwise, mostly falls in that mid to light tone range, and I really enjoy this one as well. So that is finally it. I hope I can get this down in the editing process. I really enjoyed this concept. If you are a creator and you want to film this video, I would love to hear your answers as well. Let me know if you do film this. Let Alejandra know. tag us over on Instagram, all that jazz. And thank you so much for hanging out for a very long video today. I hope if you did enjoy today's video, you'll consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing before you go so that I can see you in the next video. And I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful makeup days.